Hi there. And this is a response to the RRS versus Kirk Cameron Nightline debate, with a famous one where Kirk Cameron brings up his famous croco duck. So this is really the archetypal type of argument you get from creationists that are trying to discuss where are the transitional forms, or the intermediates, no missing fossils, or the sudden emergence of how does an eye suddenly evolve out of nothing. All of those types of arguments, you hear this type of stuff all the time. The perfect example is the one that Kirk Cameron famously brought up in his croco duck, which is this one right here.
Now what I'm about to show you does not exist. These were actually created by our graphic artists, but I want you to keep your eye out for this, because this is what evolutionists have been searching for hundreds of years. All right, and if you find one of these, you could become rich and famous. So here's some transitional forms. This is called the crocoduck. Can you see this?
God.
Or there are comments like this where Haggart's response to Richard Dawkins.
Sometimes it's hard for a human being to study the ear or study the eye and think that happened by accident.
I beg your pardon, did you say by accident?
Yeah.
What do you mean by accident?
That the eye just formed itself somehow.
Who says it did?
Well, some evolutionists say it.
Not a single one that I've ever met.
Really?
Really?
Oh.
You obviously know nothing about the subject of evolution.
Or maybe you haven't met the people I have.
Now I think a good analogy that clear up a lot of the illusions here and difficulty some people have in grasping these topics is the concept of language drift. So language similarly is copied from one person to the next, and over time it changes. It doesn't have the same sort of selective pressures as nature with an organism, but it does undergo something called drift, so it changes over time. So after a very long process, it can change from one thing into another, right? So there's copying and there's error in copying, two of the ingredients necessary in change. So you get something like Rome, in ancient Rome, in the Latin that they spoke there, it over hundreds and hundreds of years, it turns into French and it turns into Italian, and it drifts off into a Portuguese, and it undergoes that type of change, and happens a lot in different language. Even if you listen to tapes from, you know, close to 100 years ago, the Americans sounded different. Australian, where I'm from, if you listen to old tapes from the 50s, they sound different. And if another 50 years will sound different again, and even be more foreign than ones 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So it's kind of like saying, in the transition from languages, you're suddenly going from Latin, and all of a sudden you're going to be speaking one French word will pop up, and then another French word will pop up. Right? Where are the transitional languages? But every language that time would be the language of the time. Right? This is the whole point. It's not being grasped here. That every language right now, what I'm speaking now, is a transitional language form from what my parents spoke and what my children will speak. Absolutely indistinguishable. But given 50 generations, they will sound different. I guarantee that. There'll be different words in use, there'll be different pronunciations, there'll be all bleed in from other languages, and it will change over time. So the creationist argument of the formation of a crocoduck, it'll be analogous to the transition from a Latin and suddenly a French word pops up, and then another French word will pop up, right? Where no one spoke that word before, but it'll be hundreds of minute changes in that language journey, right? And, you know, there could even be brought into this whole concept of kinds. They go, well, English is a kind, and it will never change from its kind of English, right? But that's like saying, like Scottish is it's English, but it's on the cusp of, you know, give it probably another 100 years, and the ability for us to understand from American to Scottish could be impaired enough that it's no longer English. Or maybe you're ready. Where do you put the boundaries when you say these kinds? So I think language and drift has got a very good analogy to that. That also goes into the concept of where a dog doesn't suddenly give birth to a cat type argument, and that, you know, where the whole concept of there's a point where there's a species is one and then the other. With languages, it would be a gradual sleep, and you cannot find one point where there's a change between one another. They're all as similar to their predecessor and their precursors, right? They're all exactly like that, right? So the same with evolution. Every animal will be so similar to its parents, it's indistinguishable, the same as language. And that was my point. Thank you.